Good morning, 7.2 and 7.3. Well, what can I say? We have finally come to the end of term. It's your final week of this scheme of work, of the year, of the term, of me being a teacher. There will be a video coming later on in the week that I'll just pop into an email just to say my farewells. Obviously, it's this very strange time. As it's your first year in Sunny Ward, you wouldn't necessarily know how we would go about things, but we would definitely have a final lesson together where we would, just say our farewells and good luck. It'd be more of a relaxed lesson. We'd still be working right up to the end though, it's not perhaps quite like primary. So in that respect, this lesson is going to be a fun lesson. This is what we've been building up for to this whole point of looking at dystopia and looking at what the conventions of a dystopian novel are. What do I mean by conventions? Well, features essentially. What makes it? We're looking at the setting, we're looking at the tone, the ambiance of the novel. We're looking at protagonists, antagonists. We're looking at all sorts, and those kind of words and vocabulary that you would associate with dystopia. Some of you are finding this fine. Some of you are struggling, and I've said all the way along it's really hard to do this remotely, but don't fear because you're not missed out on anything. Come September, we'll just hopefully with any luck we'll all be back in school and you'll be seeing the new teachers and everything's going to be fine, and there will be a period of adjustment and catching up, but it's okay, it's going to be absolutely fine. So what we need to do really essentially is to write our own dystopian story. Let's just have a recap first over what kind of things we were looking at. So one of the main tasks that I asked you to do was to look at dystopian, kind of the atmosphere, what images are associated with the word. So there isn't a do now task per se, but what I'd like you to do is, as I go through these slides, if you wouldn't mind just flicking back at your work, hopefully you've kept it in a safe place, and you can see kind of the notes that you've made, because that's going to really help you get your brain in gear and writing your own story. So what do you think the author is trying to show when writing a dystopian novel? What emotions are associated? I asked you for 10 adjectives. We looked at the similarities and the dissimilarities between dystopian and utopian, and what kind of settings we were looking at. And then also as part of your preparation, because like I said, everything that we've been doing so far has led us up to this point, we had to kind of annotate and describe images, didn't we? And there was even a task where we had to draw our own picture, which was always good fun. If we can remember my lovely drawing, it was, quite wonderful, wasn't it? So let's have a look. We've recognised, and hopefully we've recognised what a dystopian setting is. There are certain conventions and features of a novel in this way. So we looked at the characters, didn't we? Look at ordinary people, not extraordinary places, people with tremendous power, heroes or heroines that fight against those with power. Sometimes the narratives are told in first person. The settings, this is really crucial. Worlds close to destruction, places under heavy surveillance with citizens, places controlled by technology, for example, robots, thoughts and feelings, so fear, control. The control can come from political, corporate or religious. A lack of trust against nature, trust in technology and science, power and survival. So with those kind of things in mind, so we are going to plan using the typical way that we would go about planning any particular story. It doesn't make any difference. And if you feel perhaps that your understanding of dystopian fiction is limited, perhaps you're not feeling particularly au fait with it, and you're not feeling very comfortable just writing a story. I said that to one or two other people. I'd much rather just read something that you've written, a nice creative piece. Lots of you enjoy writing creatively, so just don't worry too much, okay? So we need to think about a story. What is the purpose? What happens to the main character? Now, last lesson was to create a main character. So hopefully you've got your main protagonist, or maybe he's the antagonist, maybe he's the evil person. Does something dramatic happen, a climax? Is there a major discovery, a fight, a death, and how does it end? And this is where you're going to plan. I do have, like we did with the Harry Potter, there is a way that we can plan it. So beginning, the outline, the setting, and your main characters. So when you redo a plan, you can do a choice of bullet points. So you can literally just go, oh, do you know, I'd really like to start it there. And then I go, oh, that might lead on to there. And then, oh yeah, I could do that bit there. And you can literally just write it on a piece of paper. You can do a mind map, so you can pop it in the middle and say, right, this is going to happen. Mind maps don't tend to necessarily work with this idea because obviously there is a flow. There's a natural beginning, middle, and end. There is a lovely diagram coming up. But just as I'm talking this through with you, just get your pen and paper with your additional work you've been completing over the last few weeks, and just sort of just write down some ideas as we go. So the beginning, like I said, you outline the setting and the main characters. This is going to be through detailed description, okay? We're going to show, not tell. What kind of world are they living in? Reveal how or why this could be considered a dystopian society. But you need to do it slowly and subtly, okay? This is what I'm saying. We don't just plonk in. Perhaps your first sentence will be, this is a dystopian society. No, we need to give those kind of clues and hints to the reader, i.e. me, but just imagine it's not. Imagine it's going to be a published piece of work. Then there's some rising action, so introduce a problem. What is your protagonist unhappy with or trying to achieve? How will they get there? What could stand in their way? Then there's going to be a climax, the highest point of action or suspense. Does your protagonist meet the antagonist? Okay, are there going to be a battle or a duel? Is there a struggle? Is there a fight? Do they discover something shocking? And then there's a falling action on the resolutions. This is where the story comes down to a climax, comes to an end. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a happy ever after because of the conventions of dystopian fiction. What happens to your characters? Has anything changed? You know, it could well be that your main protagonist, your main character, he may well not make it to the end, and that's just that could be something that you could explore. So here is the kind of diagram I'm talking about when I like to plot a creative story. So beginning is a bit here, and this is where you can fill in the little boxes. This will probably take you 10 minutes, ideally minimum 10 minutes to plot and have a rough idea of how your story is going to go. Like I said, the rising action is here, where something is beginning to not feel right, perhaps they've spotted something, perhaps if you're going to include some evil robots, perhaps you start seeing a patrol on the street and they're coming past the houses. Then there's the climax, perhaps then, well, your protagonist might start battling the evil robots. Falling action, like I said, leading up to the end, and then resolution. Stop this video and draw the little diagram with this lovely mountain here, and actually just plot it and really take time to think. And it can be really hard to imagine and to think. So maybe sometimes, and you know, lots of real life authors and filmmakers and artists draw from other people's work, and there is nothing wrong with that, okay? You can't be expected to come up with something unique and, you know, never done before. So have a look at some of these pictures here. It might be your favourite film, it might be a favourite book of yours. Do you remember the very first task we had to do? We had to list our favourite films and books that perhaps could have fitted into or under the dystopian heading, and actually maybe you do use similar plot or similar storylines, similar characters, and that is okay, because I'm not going to be judging you on authenticity, i.e. how original it is. I'm going to be looking and appreciating, and not even judging, appreciating how you've gone about writing. I'm going to be appreciating your types of adjectives and your sentence structures and your punctuation. So really, don't panic too much. I know some of you are really finding it a bit of a struggle last week to come up with a character. Don't. Just think, draw upon something, one of those books or novels or films that we've talked about. So that is the slide here. Again, there's more ideas for you. And then also, just to help you inspire your story, there's lots of ways we can inspire your story for you. There are 4 scenarios here, so perhaps you would like to choose one of these if you really are stuck. So perhaps you're a brain surgeon, and every time you perform a surgery, you have the ability to see memories of the patient you're operating on. Get a deep cut for the first time in your life. Instead of bone and muscles, you see wires. It's 3 a.m. An official phone alert wakes you up. It says, do not look at the moon. You have hundreds of notifications, hundreds of random numbers, and are sending it, it's beautiful night tonight, look outside. You sound suddenly stopped, a noise every living being has heard all their lives for millions of years, and a tone so constant and omnipresent, which means everywhere, is only noticeable by its absence. The sound has stopped. Right, and moving on. There's some more writing prompts here. At birth, everyone has a date they will die tattooed on their arm, and you were supposed to die yesterday. I love this one. This is fantastic. The world ended right in front of me. It fell apart and shook beneath our feet. Buildings began disintegrating, crumbling, taking people down with it. The stars looked so cool, he yelled as he excitedly pulled up to her back porch, surprisingly strong for someone so small. She gasped when she saw the key, fear taking hold. Those aren't stars, Sam. And the first successful hybrids escaped from the laboratory. Or his dad tried to warn them all, everyone who would listen. The problem is, no one did. They cast him aside as that crazy prepper guy with the EMP attack took out the grid. His dad vanished with only a cryptic message left behind. So there's some really lovely writing prompts there. You can choose one, adapt it, make it your own. And then here's another way of planning your answer. And perhaps you're probably sitting here and thinking, oh, I'm a bit bombarded and a bit overwhelmed with the amount of planning I have to do. You don't have to do all of this planning, but remember, the more planning you do, the better your story is going to be. So your first sentence, so not only are we going to make sure we've got a beginning, we're going to really focus on the first sentence. Direct speech, exclamation, question, preposition, concentrate on the time of day. Remember, you can set the date and the time of day within that very first sentence, which gives us a lot of clues. Actually, if someone's going about at 2 o'clock in the morning, the reader will automatically know that something is amiss, something is not quite right. Likewise, if you said snow was falling all around, yet the sun was blaring in the sky, immediately a writer will know that what the weather is. Weather is representing what's happening in the story, which is a form of pathetic fantasy, but also we know that there shouldn't be a blazing sun with snow in the sky. So we automatically know that there's something not quite right. Outline the setting and your main characters. Include thorough and detailed description, and this is where you're going to have to use a thesaurus. What kind of world are they living in? Reveal how or why this could be considered a dystopian society. So think about what you will reveal slowly and subtly. Like I said, the sun and the snow, for instance, or you could mention a robot that was observing you on keeping a watch on you. Perhaps you could mention a government building that was towering over your house. Rising action, like I said, introduce the problem. What happens? Climax, usually is going to be a struggle, a fight, or even a death, and then the falling action is resolution. You can choose to use this, or you can just do the simple mountain flow chart that I showed you earlier. Or alternatively, and I know this week I'm not going to get any email this week saying, Miss, I don't know, I can't think of any ideas, because there is some ideas here. So there is a dystopian plot generator, which our lovely my lovely colleague Mrs. V has discovered. So thank you very much for this. I'm going to put this onto Teams so you can just be able to click on the link, but essentially you fill it, or you press suggest, and it will be filled automatically. So for instance, this person has done it and it's come up with 2100, the year of the zombies, and it will come up and it will just be a lovely suggestion. So a nuclear attack has destroyed the world as we know it. The year is 2100. Haven was a frozen place ruled by zombies, once glorious, sadly walled academy is now shattered. Reasonable teacher of biology and English, Professor Doris Snoscumber is humanity's only hope. I love it. This is where you now have a general idea in your mind, and so by this point in your learning, you should have probably taken 30 minutes minimum to go through the slides that I've discussed and stopped the video. So 30 minutes to have a rough draft of how you're going to start and have the middle and have the end. Like I said, you should have had your character from last week. Okay, so it is now, once you've done that, the first 30 minutes, it is now time to write your dystopian short story. So remember, this is supposed to be the equivalent of 3 to 4 hours of English each week. And guys, it is your final week. Okay, so I really, really want 100% effort from you, please. Use the knowledge or the notes and the plan that you've developed today, but also from all the other weeks that we've been doing this. And then go back to the work that we've covered in class and subsequently in remote learning, and look at similes, metaphors, alliteration and adjectives. We've done this absolutely to death. Similes, like or as; metaphors, they are; alliteration, where you're starting each subsequent words with the same letter. Snowy shoes, for instance, and adjectives. And this is where you're going to have to use a thesaurus. Most of you have access to a phone or an Xbox or a parent's phone, and that you just type in thesaurus and it'll come up with some really lovely alternatives. Maybe you want to say something's cold, but then Google and search something that's an alternative to the word cold, okay? And show, don't tell. You're not going to be very literal about it. You're going to be quite subtle about it. Just try your best to at least write 1.5 sides of an A4 piece of paper. That is really the only way that you're going to be able to have that beginning, that middle, that climax, the resolution and the ending, really. To achieve all of that, you're going to have to do it at a minimum of 1.5 pages. More if you want to, that's absolutely fine. So I would suggest, if I were in class with you, I would give you a whole lesson to do this after your plan. So you'd have 30 minutes of time to plan, and then I would give you the lesson to write it. And I think that's probably what you would think is fair. So if that is the basic, then you really, by now, you're looking at about 1.5 hours worth of work, which I think is fun. It's a creative piece. It's your last piece for me, so make it a really, really good one. Once you've done that, there is the option, and it's up to you. I would like you to reread, and I would like you to highlight for me. And I want you to highlight, we'll draw a box around the setting, your protagonist or an antagonist, and any technological advances. So basically things that make it a dystopian novel or story, okay? And then perhaps give you highlight any language devices so that I can clearly see them, you can clearly see them. Now here is a really lovely form or chart for you as a self-assessment. I would like you to go through this. You don't need the actual copy of this, but what you can do is you can go, right, have I included some dystopian figures in my writing? Well, yes, I've got a camera that's surveillance camera that's watching someone. So you go, right, yes, I spent some time planning before writing. Yes, there is clear structure to my writing. It's a definite beginning, middle and end. I have included paragraphs, so don't forget the paragraphs, but they are linked together in a logical sequence, okay? I have included some detailed description. I have tried to use a range of language devices. I have tried to use a range of structural devices. I have used some ambitious word choices. I've used a range of punctuation. We're always harping on about the punctuation. So where can you try to put an exclamation mark? Where can you try to put a semicolon, for instance? Or at very, very minimum, could you please make sure you've got commas and full stops? I have used a range of sentence types. So we're going to have simple ones, compound, complex. But forget those words, terminology. Are there long ones? Are there very short ones to create tension and suspense? Let's just focus on that for a second. My verb tense is consistent, so you're not going to go I was and then I am, or the protagonist was and or he is. And make sure it's past tense or present tense, and you can only choose. And again, like I said, you could either do it from the first person or the third person, so you could be narrating the story. So you've got a protagonist and you say, he, let's call her the protagonist. Let's call her Mrs. What does she call Mrs. Oh, where's the example here? Mrs. Snoscumber. Okay, so to make sure that you can choose whether you're doing first or third person, you can have Mrs. Snoscumber left the house in a hurry, or you can say I left the house in a hurry. You can choose whether you are that protagonist, or you're narrating what happened to the protagonist. Maybe you are the antagonist. Maybe you are the evil person and you are controlling and manipulating society. And that would be a really interesting development. So again, I'm going to pop this PowerPoint up onto Teams so that you can go through it bit by bit. Not the video, just the PowerPoint, so you can go it slowly. If you do have access to a printer, you could even print things off. It would really help you. There will be a link for the generator just in case you're stuck. And I really look forward just to reading your final piece of work for me. Just have fun with it. And like I said, if you aren't sure, if you're not feeling particularly comfortable with the things we've covered over the last few weeks, just try to write me a story, remembering key vocabulary, really push yourself using that thesaurus to come up with alternative words, synonyms that mean the same thing. Focus on your punctuation and focus on your sentence types. That's it, okay? That's your very bare minimum. If you want to do the other tasks, but highlighting and making sure that you can see where you've done key points, brilliant, fantastic. But I'd much rather just receive, as many stories for me to read as possible. And just because it's the final week doesn't mean I'm not going to be marking them. I of course will mark them. I may not give you feedback, but ultimately I want you to be proud of your work. I want you to bring everything in together. It's a bit like our plotting of our story, isn't it? This is the climax of our remote learning. And you have all worked really, really hard. It'd be really shame to not fulfil the final task. If you have any concerns, get your parents or yourselves just to pop me an email. I'm, again, like I said, here to give you a hand if you require anything else. But hopefully this lesson is pretty self-explanatory and a fun one. And look out for the video that's coming in a few days' time, which I will send it in an email. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much, you sevens, and have fun. Take care.